Welcome to the full experience where each episode we break down one of four slices of a television series to bring out its flavor. We watch the first, we watch the ultimate, we watched the lowest, and we watched the last episode. This week, we are in the third of four on The Munsters. The lowest rated episode of The Munsters is season 1, episode 14, Grandpa Leaves Home. First aired December 24th, Christmas Eve, 1964. I'm Tom Merritt. He's Brian Brushwood.
Tom, look, every so often, and we're very young in all of this, every so often, the worst episode becomes a treasured gem that I deeply, deeply love. And that is exactly what happened this time with the Munsters. Tell me, am I alone here? Or
okay, this is interesting because my theory last week was, I don't know. I feel like the ultimate episode wasn't that much different in tone from the first. What if the lowest rated episode is just slightly lower and doesn't feel that much worse than the others? And you're telling me it may be your favorite.
You know what? I'm going to say it's as good as everything else. Now, keep in mind, I do
think that carried through. Is like I didn't look at this and think that it was significantly worse than the other two we've seen so far.
Well, and we should disclose that we don't know the reasons why certain episodes are highly rated versus lower rated.
Yeah.
As best we can tell with the Munsters, because there are 25 episodes per season for 2 seasons.
More,
It could be that just like this was more popular because it had a popular guest star, what have you. In this case, like the highest rated episode was, I don't know, 10% higher rated than.
Yeah, it was like 8.1 to 7.1, right? The lowest is not that low.
And this one was like barely lower than the others. It just so happens, however, Tom, that the subject of this is it has to do with the variety arts, has to do with being a magician, has to do with a bunch of inside references with magic and magicians. There was references to Houdini and Thurston and the classics of the sideshow world, fire eating and so on. Tom, I'm sorry, I straight up love this episode.
This is unfair for you to judge, right? Like
I have to recuse myself.
It could have gone the other way, though. It could have been like the theme is magic, and Brian's tearing it apart because they got it all wrong, and they obviously was written by somebody who knew nothing about magic. But it passed the test. Sounds like.
Well, if I was to guess, the reason it was lower rated was quite simply because it was familiar territory at that time. So heyday of vaudeville, the 10s, the 20s.
Yeah, right. It's not that much longer. It's a couple days. Exactly, it would be as long before this as the 90s is for us now.
So imagine on MTV Music Awards, right now on Frame Rate, Blurred Lines. Like that's how far back the heyday of vaudeville was. And now they're riffing on that. So it could be that it's lower rated because it was just kind of cliche at this point. I don't know.
It was also a little bit, and again, these ratings are taking place now. They're not taking place back in the 60s. So maybe that's, part of it too, is it's dated, but then the whole Munster series is dated. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but the start was a little slow. It was a very cliche, the boy is misunderstood and runs away from home, except in Munster style, they turned it on its head, and Grandpa is misunderstood and runs away from home, and enlists the boy in trying to drum up sympathy with the parents who don't believe he'll really go through with it. And so the best thing to do is just ignore it. And he won't go, but he goes, and then it turns into a vaudeville act. It turns into a magic show with dancing girls and everything.
Can I loop in Amos for this to see whether or not I'm alone on this? Amos, did you happen to watch this episode?
Of course I did.
Okay. So, to me, gentlemen, this felt like a proto episode of What We Do in the Shadows. Very strongly. You had the empathetic main character who
Sure.
was annoyed by everything. You had the opposite of everything character. In this case, it's Grandpa. In What We Do in the Shadows, it might have been like
Laszlo
or
yeah.
or Laszlo would be the kind of smoother of everyone. But there was definitely a moment where Grandpa was playing the psychic vampire, the fourth type of vampire, just sapping on everyone's energy and so on. And in that regard, like I don't know, I may have liked this more than I liked the highest rated episode.
One thing that I thought was interesting, comparing the highest rated to this one, is that both these episodes are about choosing family over fortune. Because in the end, Grandpa wins them over and they want to sign him up, right? And he decides to go back to his family because he realizes he missed them. That's kind of what happened with Herman in the Rookie episode, which would air later, but same kind of theme.
Yeah.
Brian?
No, I'm already agreeing with everyone. I would love to know anyone's opinion who is not mine.
I thought this episode played out really well with basically there's an A plot and there's no B plot, there's no C plot. There's just the one single line through it. I thought the pacing was amazing, especially for an older episode like this. Like you didn't have it didn't feel rushed. It did start a little slow, but that was only because the subject matter kind of hit home, because I've had a parent living with me before that played similar games.
And it's also well worn ground at this point. That kind of trope. Yeah.
Right. And also, that first 5 minutes is entirely nothing but Grandpa doing Colin Robinson material.
Totally.
Where it's like just crumpling the paper a little bit too long to annoy everybody and. In
fact, the first 5 minutes of the show, I was just sitting there thinking, man, this is like the prototype for half of the Brady Bunch episodes I've ever seen. Like. One of the kids doesn't feel appreciated and tries to be a little extra annoying. The trope is there, and it's a trope, and we understand it, and we enjoy it because it relates so well to actual life. I thought it was great. The chest that the not the chest. What do they call it? The
armoire or whatever.
Yeah. It's got Houdini's name on it. It's crossed out. It's got like some other people's name on it. It's all crossed out.
Another famous, and this is where I have to recuse myself because like these are legends in magic,
and they got it right. Everybody knows Houdini, but Thurston, I don't think most people these days know. Yeah,
correct.
But yeah, it's just lined out. There's like no, is just the conspicuous way that it was lined out to add that little bit of history to the story in just a simple prop. It is. I really enjoyed this episode and the way that it laid out and just how fun it was. And of course it's campy. It's so campy. And I loved every bit of it. Every little stupid joke they had in there was just perfectly timed and it was great. I loved it.
I liked the shtick where Herman goes up to help and his preternatural strength is looked on as must be part of the show, right? Because that's the ongoing shtick, is that Herman accidentally is never found out, even though he's a monster.
Right.
And up to the line of like, wow, that family doesn't even take off their makeup and costumes when they go home. That's commitment to the biz.
Yeah. Even the guy, Herman's out looking for Grandpa, and the guy's working on his car, and he's clearly working on an engine, and then he sees Herman and jumps into the engine department of the car, and there's clearly no engine in there, but he must be able to work on. It must be easier to work on from the inside,
Yeah,
just the stupid little joke. It's so fun.
It is kind of funny to know that the rules of this vaudeville style comedy are like no longer than 1 minute from a punchline. And it's like you can almost count down. It's like, okay, new encounter, 3, 2, 1.
Is that Rhinestone? No, Tombstone. But
right.
And I don't know. Like, I think we adore it in a meta way right now with a little bit of detached from our hearts. But I wonder what it was like to see it at the time, where it's like, oh, this is just like I remember 30 years ago in the so-and-so theater.
Well, yeah, because you've got two nostalgia things working here. One is the vaudeville situation. The other, and I think Al Lewis was probably is that his? Did I say his name right?
Grandpa.
Yeah, I think he probably was. I think he was a vaudevillian
for mayor.
Yeah, and then I think you've also got the 50s horror movie nostalgia, which is not super nostalgia because it's recent, but it's more, I guess, parody versus nostalgia at that point. Yeah. But it works as nostalgia for us now.
And there's such a sweetness to it that really, really works. Like, and granted, we're only going to get to see 4 of these episodes, but the fact that Herman is always thinking the best of everyone around him and is genuinely confused when people don't get along for whatever reasons, and he always assumes the best of everyone around him. I don't know. It's really adorable.
There's other things too, like the way that Herman's wife looks at him, like she's always just completely enamored with him, even though he's a monster by anyone else's standards. You know, she adores the fact that he's just she knows he's an oaf, but you know, she loves him for that. And
he's also the only monster. Like, nobody sees Grandpa and immediately assumes he's a vampire. Nobody sees her and immediately assumes, she's a crafted wife of Frankenstein. And at most, people look at Eddie and think, well, that's a curious boy.
Yeah.
Whereas like Herman is a genuine monster, and yet his joy just radiates out from him. Like, I just want to give him the biggest hug, except for I'm afraid he would crush me. It's really great.
Yeah. Fred Gwynn's way of playing him too is just his movements. And I know he's on like elevated shoes to make him taller and everything, but his movements are just so unique. They are so Herman Munster. Like, you could just see a silhouette moving and go, that's Herman Munster. Like, it's so identifiable.
So that brings me into something else I wanted to mention. There are certain props on the show that just make sense for the show. Like when, what's Herman's wife's name? I don't want to keep
Lily.
saying Lily. When Lily she's like crocheting spider webs. When Herman's sitting there.
Oh yeah.
You know, it just makes sense. Okay, that just fits. But then certain other things, like, why does Herman take a not a suitcase, but like a briefcase to work with him when he's a gravedigger? You know, what is a gravedigger?
Or a mortician?
Yeah. You know, like,
well, there's paperwork when you're a mortician.
But it fits the trope of the time and the understanding that the man goes out to work and he's got to have his briefcase because he's got the important work papers in there, and it's got his lunch in there or whatever. Some of the and then the clock on the wall. I know it's an ongoing trope that we're barely going to be able to see in this because we didn't see it at all in the first episode. But that damn Nevermore clock I remember that clock being one of the reasons I watched the show when I was little,
really?
Because it was just you never knew when it was going to pop in, and when it did, it was just always so fun. Just, they'd always throw something at it, or like I think one time it fell off. It was just one of those little gags that I loved going through it. But all the props in the show fit so well. It's fun. It's fun to watch.
I only noticed one serious anachronism in this one. There's some general anachronisms, just the types of cars or whatever, but an anachronism meaning for us, it feels like an anachronism, not an anachronism within the show, but talking about taking a ship to Hong Kong. When they were looking to help Grandpa run away from home, like not a plane, partly because he's a vampire, right? You can't be sitting on a plane in the bright sunlight, I suppose. But nobody takes a ship to Hong Kong these days. It's just not even something that you would do, and it certainly wouldn't have the Times published in the newspaper.
The newspaper that was, by the way, the same paper reprinted 8 times and just stuck together.
Yeah, totally.
As a matter of fact, if anybody wants to jump down a rabbit hole, like, just look up, like, there's one edition of one newspaper that has been reprinted a bazillion times for the purpose of being IP clearance free in everything you've ever seen up to last year.
Mm-hmm. Did anyone notice that Marilyn was only in the final scene?
I did notice that she was not around.
They made a point of saying, "Where's Marilyn? Oh, she's busy doing this. She called and said X." And as soon as they're like, "She called and said," I'm like, "Oh, she was unavailable for this episode." Then we saw her at the end. I'm like, "Well, she wasn't unavailable for the entire episode, but apparently for part of it."
But this also was clearly like at the twilight of the career of the person playing her at this point, because she gets replaced.
This is the replaced one. This is Pat Priest. We've already replaced the original Marilyn.
I thought we were going back in time now. I thought
we did. She only was in the first 8 episodes, and this is episode 14.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Also, speaking of calling on things, that phone booth being the coffin that springs out of the wall.
Oh, yeah, that was cute.
And then she's got to call the operator to patch her through to the club.
Yeah.
So much fun.
Yeah.
So, separate story, and I don't want to spill too much tea, but I met somebody. I think both of you guys have been out to Wizard Academy, and that attracts a curious cast of characters. There was a guy, 58 years old, who works in reality television. He is one of the folks who runs around with a TV camera, for the live, cop style, somebody's about to get taken down stuff. And we were hanging out, and I was asking him about his background, and he brought up just quite randomly, he's like, "Well, when I was a kid, we lived in this area of Hollywood, and there was an actor, I don't know if you know his name, Fred Gwynn."
Oh, wow.
And I was like, "Shut up." And so he talked about what a sweetheart Fred Gwynn was, and he was 8 years old, and Fred Gwynn would make him tea and coffee and stuff. It was really amazing.
He grew up with Herman Munster. That's awesome.
Yes.
That's great. Well, folks, any other last thoughts on the lowest but still well-beloved episode of the Munsters, Grandpa Leaves Home, season 1, episode 14?
I'll say this much, that there was a kind of golden age of television Hollywood, and there was a time when the curve was virtually flat, and I think that we're enjoying one of the elements of that time period.
I was a little nervous that my childhood memories of this show, when we initially said we were going to do it, would not hold up, and I'm glad to see that they've been exceeded. I'm enjoying this more now than I think I did when I was young, and now I'm just worried about the last episode. Is the last episode going to be the one that disappoints us?
I just thought Munsters was kind of goofy with some funny jokes when I was a kid. I enjoyed it for that. I loved it for that. Right. I am learning that there was more appeal that I probably was also enjoying, but wasn't aware of when I was a kid. So what do we expect from the finale? I'm expecting it just another episode. That there will not be any indication that this is the finale. There will not be any goodbyes. This will just be another episode of the Munsters. It just happens to be the last one they put on TV.
I would not be surprised if they, as they shot it, did not know that this would end up being the last episode. It was just another episode, and then they found out months later that they weren't renewed.
Yeah,
there's pretty
common back then.
There's no real through line in this, right? Other than the first episode, the pilot being, okay, we have to introduce everybody. After that, it was kind of just every episode could be in any order.
Every episode is a ship in a bottle. Yeah,
right. Yeah, so. Yeah, it'll be interesting as long as it holds up to the expectations that we've now built up for ourselves, because we've enjoyed these last 3. As long as it holds up to that, it'll be interesting to see how, if it does come to some sort of a conclusion, or if there's just another episode. I'm looking forward to finding that out.
Well, the last episode is season 2, episode 32, A Visit from the Teacher. Eddie writes a school paper about his parents. The teacher and principal are concerned about his overactive imagination until they visit the Munster home to see for themselves.
Okay, so there might be some closure to some of the tropes. There's a possibility.
No.
We'll find out next week on the full experience. If you're curious what we'll be watching after the Munsters, become a patron, patreon.com/Cordkillers. We will be deciding that on After Talk very shortly. So you can be the first to know by becoming a patron, patreon.com/Cordkillers. And you also get episodes of the full experience first. You get them right away as soon as they are ready, rather than having to wait until Wednesday. So go become a patron, patreon.com/Cordkillers, and we will deliver the last episode of the Munsters, the completion of the full experience next time. Talk to you then.